welcome the two of you to the show today. You've both been on the show before. For all of our listeners tuning in, this Rooted Leadership podcast. We're here in Salem, Oregon. I'm the host, Chris Pineda. We've been doing this for a while and just enjoy being able to meet with leaders locally, leaders from outside of our community. We've had lots of different guests over the last couple of years. But today's fun because you've both been on the show, like I mentioned before. Justin, I think last year.
About a year ago, I think.
About a year ago.
Yeah, glad to be back.
And Brian, I think you were one of our first episodes that we ever had. Yeah. And got a lot of downloads on that one.
Ooh.
You got a lot of friends, apparently.
Friends and family.
Yeah, friends and family. Thanks for joining the show. We have you both on for multiple reasons, but the main reason is you're our speakers tomorrow for our session. So as anybody who's been listening to the show knows, we have a leadership institute that we run in town. We take leaders from all across the community, different sectors. We bring them together. They spend a whole year with one another, and we've created quite an institute and a movement and a program here. And you were both part of year one. You've come back and you've been supportive as alumni in multiple ways, as mentors, presenters, and so on. But tomorrow you're co-speaking, which is kind of a new thing we're doing. We're having alumni kind of get together and have to prepare a presentation or speak to our leaders together. And we're actually coming to you. So we're going to go to one of your locations. So a little bit about you two from my perspective, and then you can please fill in any blanks you want. CEO and COO of Neighborly Ventures. Your development, real estate development, construction, property management organization. All of those things. Am I missing anything?
No, that's it.
No, those three things, which is a lot. It's a lot of the lifespan of real estate from start to finish. Multifamily housing, right? Yeah. And you've been doing, Brian, I know you've been doing that for several years before you were an attorney here in town, but you practiced real estate law, right? Yeah. And Justin, you did skilled nursing,
property management. Yeah, property management in healthcare, skilled nursing, and then here in multifamily for the past 4 years.
Yeah. And you were in the skilled nursing for what?
20 plus
years. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. And now you're both here together. I know you guys were friends a long time ago, and so you kind of came back together. So it's kind of a fun story there. But that's just what you both do for work. I know you're both family men of faith as well, and your faith and your family are really important to both of you. You got a bunch of kids between the both of you. What do you got between the both of you? Like 12 kids?
That's a big number. We have 12.
12 kids combined. Yeah, 12 combined. Yeah, and both of your partners, your spouses, your wives are amazing women. I've met both of them. Just amazing families and people. So it's always fun having you on the show because we're friends. In addition to professional colleagues in the community. So thanks for being here.
That's an honor to be here.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add to who you are and what you do that before we jump in?
I think that's a wonderful summary. Thank you.
You were thorough.
Yeah.
All right. Didn't even have to think about it.
Nope.
So, let's jump in today. Tomorrow you're speaking on authentic leadership, and that's a pretty big topic, and I think it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. And so I wanted to talk about authentic leadership. Think about this episode as a way to get into the weeds with it, get into the details or the nuances. We can go deep. It's just us having a conversation. You don't have to, there's no presentation. So let's go deep with that. But in addition to that, I also wanted to talk about the research that we conducted with your organization now 2 years ago. We started about 2 years ago, and the purpose of that research was to validate our framework, the Rooted framework, which we've talked a lot about on the show, to validate that, and maybe we'll start there, and I'll give a little bit of context on my perspective in that, and then I would love to quickly turn it to the two of you. Is that all right? So we started this research, again, 2 years ago, the idea of validate the framework. And for your organization particularly, we didn't want to be super intrusive. So it wasn't like, hey, we're going to come in and do all sorts of training or whatnot. It was really a lot of listening. And we call it in our framework a lot of soil work. It was trying to understand your organization from scratch, from outsiders coming in. How can we understand your organization from your strategy, your vision and mission, all the way down to your culture and the perceptions across the organization? We had several different focus groups of all different types from different properties, some folks at corporate, and then we met with your leadership several times, and it was all information gathering. We weren't presenting anything. We weren't sharing the framework. It was all just gathering information and trying to understand the different perspectives. And that was really fascinating as a researcher to see all the different things going on and people sharing stuff in confidence with us. People were being very honest. And so we found lots of strengths, lots of things that people enjoyed about your organization, but we also found lots of gaps, as we called it in the research, kind of cultural gaps that led to very, very specific challenges and problems in decision making and other things, and we'll get into that. But that was the intent, and we spent about a year doing it over the span of those several months, just listening, and then we had kind of a phase 2 where we started to address some of the challenges that were brought up using our framework. But it was pretty organic. We weren't like clicking through slides and giving people curriculum. It was just conversational. And that led to more discoveries. And throughout the process, we were giving various sort of feedback to you. We weren't naming any names. Obviously, it was all confidential, but we were sharing, here's highlights from what we're learning. So that was it. And then we ended. We wrote everything up, and we gave you the write-up. And I know that you've had a journey since that point in implementing some of the things that we discovered. So that's it in a nutshell. Now I'll turn it to you guys. Get your thoughts on that whole process, because I'm asking you to be authentic today in light of authentic leadership, because some of the stuff was hard to realize. I remember, Justin, particularly, you said, in all my years, having assessments done and trying to understand, the state of organizations, specifically in the skilled nursing where you're doing turnarounds, and you had never had that sort of thorough of an assessment or feedback given.
I think I'll just say briefly, when you have somebody coming in and looking at your organization from the outside, you kind of secretly hope the results of the research is going to be, well, you guys wrote the textbook on an organization. This is fabulous. And nothing to add here. But at the time, there was, for us, hints that there were some problems we were running into. And we kind of knew a little bit maybe why we were growing. And we were trying to solve those, but I don't know that we really fully had answers. So I think that the research that Rooted Framework did really helped us to define what the problem was, and then also identify what some potential solutions could be. So I was particularly grateful for it, even though it did create a lot of complications for us in the sense of like becoming aware of your own failures as a leader, or what you didn't see and you should have seen in the past, or you feel like you should have prepared for. Mm-hmm. So it in terms of being authentic, the research that was done forced us to be self-aware, self-honest, and authentic with ourselves and with each other through that.
Tell us a little bit about the dynamics in your organization, the structure, personnel, so that there could be listeners that might be able to relate. Everybody's in one office.
So we have a home office, and then from there we have we manage apartment complexes, multifamily apartment complexes all over the state of Oregon and in other states as well. And then as well, we have a construction company that can be out in the field, and we have a development team that can be out in the field as well. So we're not all in the same office ever. And then each group kind of works together on their own. A lot of the times it could be almost kind of like a little island. Mm-hmm. So you can have a company culture, and then you can have little tiny cultures inside of that in these completely distant areas. And you may have, as the leader at the top, you may have no idea what those other cultures are becoming all around you. And we have to find a way to stay connected, even though there's a significant physical distance between all of us.
Yeah.
And then the roles that everybody has are completely different too in many cases. Mm-hmm. It's not like it's in some cases it's the same role in different locations, but many times it can be pretty different.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a proximity was part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That was in the organization.
Yeah.
And we had a sense that might be the case. I mean, we knew that proximity was a challenge, but we also, as Justin mentioned, we sensed that there might be more going on. I'm not sure how much you want us to focus on, impressions going into the research versus what happened as a result of the research. But in terms of what we were thinking and expecting when we began that process, you came and made the offer to do the research, and we wanted to know. One thing that we understood is that we believed very much in the vision of our organization, which might be helpful for people to hear, I guess.
Yeah, please share.
In that, at Neighborly Ventures, we develop, construct, and manage multifamily housing. That's what we do, but for us, how we do what we do matters just as much, maybe if not more. So that the what is develop, construct, and manage in an increasingly outward way for a growing number of people while advancing personal growth. I could go into why that is the case if you think that would be helpful, but for us, it's a very compelling part of why we do what we do. But we could tell that there were probably some gaps in everybody's understanding of that vision and connection or commitment to the vision.
And how to implement it.
Because it's a pretty lofty, aspirational thing that might be hard for some people to feel like they can connect to. Yeah. So we were eager to understand just how well is that going in terms of that connection to the vision. And then we have some strategies that we would develop year over year as leadership. Frankly, at the time, that wasn't even largely shared. The strategies we might have in a year in our strategic plan, which as I think about now, I just think
silly.
How could we have ever thought that would work? But that was the point. And one thing I really appreciate about Justin's authenticity was you needed to pick some people to do the research with. And we wanted to do a cross-section across the organization, both of departments inside the corporate entity, but also any individuals out on these islands. And I appreciated that, our goal wasn't show us how good we are. Even though you do, as Justin said, you do kind of hope, I hope after they do the research that maybe we're doing a decent job of what we're trying to do. But most of all, we wanted good information.
Yeah.
And so Justin I think I turned it over to you to just kind of decide, well, where do you think we should have them do the research? And we just picked the areas where there might be the greatest likelihood of some disconnect. And I think that was maybe one of the first most authentic choices in response to your offer to do the research.
Yeah, because you could have easily given us the best, highest performing teams that are fully bought into vision, but I think you gave us a good sort of variety, right? Because there's certainly that in some of the groups that we met with, people that all in, and then there was others that were kind of coming along, and we had a really good sort of sample to work with. And if you don't mind, I want to share more details about some of the initial findings, and just get some of your reactions to them. I know that you already know this, but just get some of your reactions, for the sake of this conversation, and see where they take us. Because I think there's a lot of people that could be listening or watching that might be able to relate to this, whether you're in leadership or not. I think these are reflective of many sort of organizational challenges. And so I'll just list off some of these, and you can tackle any one that you want, but these are the ones that are coming to mind right now. And one of them was speaking about vision. Well, first of all, I'll say there was some really vulnerable moments and authentic moments on both of your parts, especially you, Brian. I remember sitting in with the leadership team at one point where we were giving some of the things that we found, which were not easy to hear, by the way. They were hard things to hear. And you had this moment of saying something along the lines of, look, if we're not going to, if the vision isn't what we're aiming for, and this isn't really why we're doing this, then I don't want to do this, right? The vision is why I'm doing this. I don't do this because I love real estate development and construction, right? Like that's what we do. That's not what I'm in love with. I'm in love with why we do it. And that was a really, I think, important moment, at least that I observed to, in the process of you stating that, and then, having to respond to some of the things that we shared with you, and then stating that and then reacting to it. But some of the things that we found related to vision was, in the vision, you say things like, specifically this phrase stuck out to a lot of people, in an outward way. And you guys are really big on outward mindset, using Arbinger's curriculum, which is rooted in, self-deception, seeing people as people. And that's very similar to a lot of Groundwork's curriculum of seeing people. We believe in that same sort of concept. And so these people are introduced to it from the very beginning. And there was this impression, this was pretty universal. When people joined the organization, really jazzed. It's like, wow, this is unlike any other property management or, organization that I've ever been a part of. And really great training right at the beginning. But then they would go off to their silo or their island, and it wouldn't be their lived experience. So people were having a hard time saying, I was told that outward mindset was so important. And to them, their understanding of it was, well, if people see me as people, then see me as a person, then I'm going to, they're going to be nice to me or whatever the case is, and I'm going to feel like I matter. People weren't always feeling that. So there was this automatic disconnection that people were feeling, where they would have a bad experience, and that would say, well, we're not outward. And they were feeling that. And that was challenging. And the interesting thing from a researcher's standpoint was, I wonder if the only reason that they're even pointing that out is because they were told that it was important. If they went to another organization, it would have been like, well, that's just how work is. If they went to another property management company, that's just property management. But here, there was something different that was told to them and given to them. So they were wrestling with that. So that was a thing that stuck out. Another thing that was really interesting, kind of a disconnect, was, I remember when we were first meeting with the leadership team, I asked, where do you think outward mindset, excuse me. That one out, Rex. Something that was interesting was, we were meeting with the leadership team. We asked, where is outward mindset most present in your work? And one of the first things said was in our decision making. When we make decisions, we do our best to take people into account, see people as people. But then one of the unanimous things that we realized, meeting with all these other groups, was that decision making was where they felt people weren't being seen the most, like people weren't being taken into account. So that was a clear sort of gap when we talk about gaps in the culture. So those are a couple, and there's more that we could get into, but I want to hear your initial sort of reactions. You can relive some of that a little bit.
Some of the pain.
Yeah. Some of the highlights.
We definitely, there is, to be as forthright as we can be, there is a moment of pain to hear the realities that aren't matching the ideals. You taught us the phrase espoused versus enacted, and that was the gap. You have, we kind of turned it into the ideal versus the reality, and they weren't matching. And we knew that was the case, but we didn't understand all the ways it wasn't the case. And so there was some initial pain, but I learned through that process that, and maybe this is something I would say is authentic leadership. I won't profess to have perfected it, but I believe it's a truth that if you're going to be an authentic leader, you have to embrace accurate information, even if it's bad news. You can't be afraid of bad news. And then when you get bad news, you have to respond appropriately. That's not that artful of a term, but and so for us, it would have been tempting to dismiss maybe some of the things that you learned in the research. Oh, that's not a good sample size, or the wrong sample, or and we might have been tempted a little bit here and there to do that. But in the end, I think generally we embraced the conclusions. The questions became, what do we do about it? Ultimately, we knew, and this is the value of having an overarching vision that you believe in. We knew where we had been wanting to go previously, and that wasn't changing. One of the things that I don't think you mentioned, but what was great news, was that the vision itself was compelling to people. Mm-hmm. That was, if I recall correctly,
absolutely,
a pretty universal
that was a big
truth.
Strength. Yeah.
It was like, hey, we believe in that. We want that.
Which is rare, by the way, because you can talk to other organizations and people down the line are not going to be able to articulate the vision. But people weren't getting it word for word, but most everybody pretty much
understood the principles, right? Mm-hmm. And the fact that their concern or experience was, we love that, and we're not getting it. While it was painful that they weren't getting it, and it evidenced for us that there were things we needed to do or stop doing, whatever the case may be, the good news of that was they wanted it and they expected it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think of it this way until now, but the way you said something a moment ago, I'm grateful we had a not only verbalized but memorialized standard, because it became something we had to hold ourselves to when it turned out that people weren't getting it. And it turned out not everybody was receiving the benefit of that vision. And so because it was so clear what it was supposed to be, they had an expectation that wasn't being met. I'm glad they had an expectation. Of course, I'm not glad when it's not being met. But at least there was an expectation, which then we could leverage and say, okay, well, we have the right expectation. It's what resonates with us and everyone in the organization. Now, what are we going to do to help shrink that gap between reality and ideal?
I think it's, in terms of authentic leadership, what Brian was talking about, how hard it can be to be an authentic leader when the pressure is on you. Yeah. When we were having those meetings where some of the data was being revealed, there was a moment where Brian had to pull me aside and say, Justin, I need you to kind of listen a little better. You know, the term we use in our organization is check your mindset, right? Because I was going through that exercise in my mind of like, where people were saying, look, the gap between the reality and the ideal. And in my mind, I was thinking, well, they're holding us to a standard that they would never hold anybody else to in any other organization. Mm-hmm. So this is ridiculous. And you go down that rabbit hole and you start thinking, well, maybe we just need to just jettison all these people and get some new people in. And it can be very difficult in those pressure moments when you feel like the rest of the company feels like, because you're trying to be authentic, that now you feel a little exposed. Yeah. And your reaction may be to fight the information, to fight the people, and to reject all of the information coming towards you. So I was grateful that Brian was able to maintain a sense of authentic leadership in that moment, pull me aside and say, Justin, this is what you wanted. So let it come out, let it be there, and let's figure out what to do with it. Let's embrace that these people want to live at this higher level. They don't know how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I was just grateful for that moment. But it just highlights how difficult it can be when you feel the weight of the entire company on you saying, well, yeah, okay, great, you're being authentic, but we don't think you're very good. That's a feeling you have in your mind, and you have to allow that to go in you and then look at what the real information is.
We didn't get into this, I don't think, in any of our sessions where we're looking over the research, but I just thought of it and the challenge that it must have been, because one of the strengths of the research was, and this is in the write-up, is that there was, compelling vision, like you mentioned, but also that the top leadership was strong, right? Everybody, that was unanimous. It's like, when I am in an interaction with Justin or Brian, I feel seen. They're great leaders. They own the vision, blah, 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 right? But then they had all these other experiences. And I can imagine as a leader that can still be really challenging, not because they're, from the organizational standpoint, but when I think of myself as a leader, I always have to remember that those that I lead are a reflection of myself somehow, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, did that come across your heart and mind, even though that they were saying with their words and their mouths that, we have our CEO and COO, they're amazing, but the fact that they had these struggles, did that personally feel like, man, is that some way a reflection of me as a leader?
I think I'm going to come to answer your question maybe in a little bit of a roundabout way. One of the things that we realized, this is an example, was sometimes the idea of being outward wasn't clearly understood. Mm-hmm. What you were hearing was something like, this is a gross oversimplification, but maybe something like this. Hey, when I joined Neighborly Ventures, I thought everybody was going to be outward, which means everybody's always going to be kind and there will never be any conflict. Yeah. I kind of recall that for some people that was the expectation. Yeah. And I remember hearing that, and my gut reaction was, well, that's just wrong. That's not what that means. And in that moment, there's a choice of feeling defensive. That's your problem. You don't understand what it means. But thankfully, it didn't take very long to realize, well, if they don't understand it, that is a reflection of me. Mm-hmm. My job as the owner and CEO of this company is to make sure everyone understands that. If it's going to be one of the most compelling parts of our stated vision, and they don't understand that accurately, that's not about them not being smart, well-intentioned people. That's a matter of the organization not teaching well enough. Yeah. And so I don't know that I felt like personal, like, wow, our middle managers are not adequately or accurately reflecting us as executives, as much as it was, I started to come to a realization that things historically that I might have attributed to maybe not having the right people or they're just not getting it, I was coming to a pretty stark realization that, well, that's my job. My job is to make sure that it's understood correctly. Yeah. And to the extent, back to your comment about the gap in management, mm-hmm. To the extent that people think, I get such a great experience with Justin and Brian, but not with what's in between. Also a reflection of Justin and Brian mm-hmm. as leaders or inadequate leaders. And that took some time to understand and embrace, but it became clear that Justin has said it well, that I think we generally are pretty authentic leaders. Mm-hmm. We were assuming that just by being authentic, we were being adequate leaders. And what we learned is that's not true.
In fact, the damage with that was that while people saw us as being authentic, like you talked about in the research you did, because they saw us as right or wrong, they saw us as authentic and living the vision. It made we hadn't provided the training for our middle management, our leaders, to be able to be authentic themselves and to lead in a more outward way. Mm-hmm. And so what happened was there was that disconnect. And when other employees looked at us and they looked at their middle managers, it made their middle managers look dishonest or disingenuous. Mm-hmm. to the vision that we had. And so by our efforts to be authentic in ourselves, we were actually making our leaders look bad to the other employees and look untrustworthy or unbelievable.
Yeah.
And so there was this disconnect that went through the organization, and we realized that it wasn't enough for just us to be authentic and that would somehow permeate through the organization on its own. We had to be a lot more, what we learned from the research is we're going to have to be a lot more intentional about how we are going to help everyone in the organization to be more authentic and to be more alive to the reality of conflict and have their part in being able to address the gap between reality and ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting observation. Is it kind of putting it almost, it felt like it was out of reach a little bit, perhaps for some of them, right? Mm-hmm. It's like when somebody you're hearing somebody speak and they just start talking about how amazing they are all the time. You're kind of like, well, it's good for you, but I'm not like that way, right? And as the top level leaders, everybody's only getting snapshots of you. So it's not like they're sitting in the meetings where you're struggling and where you're wrestling and where you're saying like, I'm super inward right now. I
in
need
our
some
employee
help.
Evaluations, they weren't seeing them.
Yeah, and I know that's an interesting thing to talk about is when you had these large corporate meetings, which you've had 2 since our research finished. I know the first one was kind of a big deal of like, hey, here we're going to reveal all the research, and we want to let you all know that we heard it, and we're going to do something about it. But was it that same one, or just this most recent one where you guys did your what do you call it?
A SAM.
Accountability meeting with each other where
See, just measure.
Yeah, and it was a real one. It wasn't scripted. It was like it was a real.
Yeah, it might be a little helpful. You're kind of transitioning, I think, into the. So what did we do?
Yeah, what did we do? And there's still more to. I mean, we can bounce around. There's still plenty that we
There's
learned.
a lot to unpack even in just what we learned from the research, but.
But speaking of this authenticity of I think one of the things you did was you dug even deeper with authenticity.
Yeah,
and vulnerability.
I think it. We made a choice that we just had to own it. Mm-hmm. We just had to own that things weren't what we wanted them to be, and it's interesting that can be really intimidating, and there were moments of it that felt intimidating, but in the end, it was also liberating. It really was liberating. What we did is we have every year a gathering of all employees and bring them all into the same conference room for a couple of days. And it's usually, I mean, at the time we probably had 85 or so employees last year. And we counseled about it at length and with you about the best way to do it. And we just realized we just have to, as the owner and CEO of the company, I just have to open up about the research. Now, some of the research was good too, so it wasn't just this complete, we're a dumpster fire of a company.
Get out while you can.
There were some great things revealed by the research too, which I think is important to note. But there was also plenty that needed to be improved, and so we talked about both very openly and just basically said, look, our vision is that everyone has this particular kind of experience. And the truth is, not everybody in our company is, and more people aren't than is right. And I got very specific about the things revealed in your research that aren't going right. And that was important for me to just openly say, and every failure or gap along the way ultimately comes back to me. And I believed that. Now, was I responsible for every choice made by every individual inside the organization that may have been poor or good? No. But in the end, I'm responsible for creating a culture and systems that facilitate the advancement of the vision, that everybody has a consistent experience. And so just let everybody know I was very sorry that I hadn't done a good enough job of that yet. And I think it was also important for people to hear that, wow, if the CEO is willing to stand up and basically bear his mistakes, I think that was important for creating authenticity throughout the organization as well.
Yeah.
That people, because when you're not authentic, you're trying to hide things.
Yeah.
You're trying to be somebody that you're not, trying to be seen as. So you end up spending so much energy on perpetuating an image.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing all of that energy on achieving the desired outcomes and purposes of the organization. That's really costly.
Yeah.
So I think in addition to the things that we can talk about that we actually implemented to create transformational change, just that moment was a huge foundation builder for letting people know we're not going to be perfect at it, but we're going to try really hard to be authentic leaders here and own our mistakes. And we hope that invites you to own yours and not try to be, not to spend that energy on needing to be seen as, but to spend your energy on advancing, helping this ship go to where we're trying to go.
Yeah, you said something that I think is really, critical to authentic leadership. You said, you shared the findings from the research and these gaps, and then you said, and I actually believed it. And to me, it's not a dictionary definition of authentic leadership. You're not going to find it in a book, I don't think. But one of the greatest definitions I heard of authentic leadership was that you actually believe in what you say and do, right? Like you actually believe it. And so the fact that you actually believed those things, that is, I think, the ultimate, indicator of authenticity is you believed it. You weren't just saying it.
Well, if all we had done is Brian stood up at the 2-day conference last year and said, here are our mistakes and I'm sorry, then it would have been just lip service, honestly. Now, I'm not going to pretend that we have since then, it would have been just an announcement, not an accomplishment. An announcement is never an accomplishment. But we knew, that was just the beginning of what we had to do. And if you want, we can talk about some of the things to try to perpetuate authenticity.
It might be helpful to define a little bit like what we saw were the gaps, the specific gaps we saw that we needed to fix. Yeah. And we've talked about the first one, which was that there was this authenticity gap between the leaders of the organization, middle management, and the rest of the organization. And so we had to find a way to be able to help our middle management leaders learn the leadership skill sets needed so that they could be authentic themselves. It isn't enough to just be able to say, hey, look, you just got to be more authentic. That's a terrifying thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we had to give them the skill set to be able to lead in an authentic way. The other thing we needed to deal with was what we identified was there was a perception, because of our idea of this outward mindset, there was a perception that conflict is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And you helped us identify in the research that we were interpreting conflict as a bad thing as an organization. Instead, we needed to embrace conflict and recognize that the closer you are with somebody, the more likely you will have conflict. In fact, you just will have conflict. And it's contention that is what you want to avoid. Conflict, you want to learn how to deal with. Yeah. You can remove some conflict, but you need to address the conflict, not avoid it. Mm-hmm. And so we had to set up some systems or some strategies for how we're going to help our middle managers, our leaders, be more authentic in their leadership, and then also help our company learn how to be comfortable with conflict, because we saw ourselves as having to work closer together on all of the challenges we faced, and that meant there was going to be more conflict. So how do you turn conflict into a good thing? Yeah. And avoid the contention that we were feeling at the time? So most of our activities that we did were based on trying to bridge those two gaps.
And what does that look like now in the organization of starting to change the paradigm of conflict? What does that look like from a kind of communication standpoint and process standpoint to help people no longer fear when conflict arises that, we better put on our put up our barriers and our walls, but rather lean into it.
Yeah, you're talking about like fast forward to now.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
okay.
what does it look like now? How have you began to bridge that by making it something that people don't have to be afraid of?
Well, I can say that we're not perfect at it yet. We're still working on this, and I think it will be. I think the way we look at it is this is pretty much a perpetual learning experience for all of us to do that, because conflict is something that creates a lot of fear and concern, and you're either going to run away from it or you're going to try and be like a bull in a china shop about it and take over a situation because of that fear that you have. So
can I
go ahead,
insert something here? Just to elaborate on something you said about how we became aware that the nature of the way we operate is going to expose conflict more. We realized this is kind of good and bad, that if we're going to do what we do in an increasingly outward way, that means being very alive to the needs and desires of other individuals you impact, right? If you're going to do that, the odds of identifying conflicts go up dramatically. Last year in that same meeting, Justin pulled up a picture of his flower bed from about 20 feet away.
Yeah.
And it looked pristine. It looked like, oh, that's some nice new bark dust sitting in there, and some nice, I don't remember what the flowers were.
Flowers are growing.
Flowers growing, right? Nothing there. If you got closer, you started to see, oh, wow, there's a lot of little weeds starting to germinate. Yeah, I mean, many, right? So the closer you examine the spaces between, and that's a term, I know you're talking about in Groundwork, and we've adopted. If you're going to be alive to all the people you impact, you are more likely actually to find conflict.
Yeah.
Just that understanding, and that's something we taught then and we've continued to try to emphasize since, has been a good start to helping people understand, like, oh, if I'm going to care about people, then I'm probably going to start seeing more where there's conflict, even between us.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's not a bad thing.
To bridging the gap and specifying these conditions for success, we're also being really clear about what it's not. And that's the scary part, I think, for any leader, any organization, and where I think we have the highest probability for settling for mediocrity or subpar, because it's like, well, as long as we're not super clear about what we could be, then we'll never know if we're not there. And so we can just live in this in the blurry waters, of rewriting the mediocrity as success kind of a thing. And so, but what I like about your organization is you're being really specific on something really compelling. And then you got feedback about, well, basically we're not that. And that's the opposite of what we could be. So we want to be that. So we have to face these fears and these challenges and the the little bit of the pain, like you mentioned, and do something about it. So authenticity, I think, is a key thread here. I know it's the topic for tomorrow, but it's a key thread. So I want to go back to the accountability meetings that we had, that we were discussing, and have you explain what those are and why that was a great thing for you both to demonstrate, because the intent of it is to help people be authentic. Mm-hmm. The intent of it is to help people be vulnerable, to be outward, to really lean into the vision. But it just shows that a process and a procedure can quickly become a transaction without the right intent behind the people doing it. And for you all realized, well, maybe they just don't know how to actually do it. So who better to show them for us to show them? So tell us more about what a SAM is, what it stands for, and then what you guys did to kind of show them.
So just a little bit of background. In one of the things we decided to do to help our middle managers be more better authentic leaders was we set up about every 6 weeks a training program where all the leaders in the company got together, and we basically taught ourselves how to be better leaders, how to be better authentic leaders. And there were various topics that we covered, whether it was trying to understand the vision better, or how to address conflict, various topics that we had, and we would teach each other these principles and how to do this, or how to be more outward, or how to teach that better. Well, in one of the first ones, we decided that we're going to need to do our key metric that we have in the company, which are these SAMs, self-accountability meetings, which is, think of it as like, a simple translation would be an employee evaluation. Mm-hmm. It'd be like your periodic employee evaluation that you do with your director. Now, we see it as a little bit different than that, where it's actually kind of two-directional that's going on, and you're reviewing the roles and objectives that the employee has and the impact that the supervisor has on the work that the employee is doing.
And I would just say that I would say it's actually pretty dramatically different than periodic employee evaluations, because the true idea is that the employee even schedules the time.
Yeah, they're running it.
They're running, right? They come in and tell their manager, here's how I think I'm impacting people. Here's what I think my capability is. Here's the amount of effort that I think I'm giving. It's either adequate or inadequate. It's their opportunity to self-examine and come to their manager, not just for the sake of reporting performance, which is when it becomes transactional and accordingly pretty meaningless, but to really constantly, I mean, we ask our employees to do this initially every month, ultimately after they've been with the company long enough, every other month. And I sorry to interrupt, but it really is about the employee coming to their manager and saying, here's how I think I'm doing, and this is our opportunity to counsel together about where I need to improve, or where you as the manager could improve in helping me. And then the manager likewise comes to that same meeting, also having examined their own impact on that individual, et cetera. So I just wouldn't want people left with the idea that this is an evaluation. Yeah. It really isn't an evaluation, other than a self-evaluation, but not just for the purposes of, well, do I get my raise now, or do I get my bonus at the end of the year? More about, am I helping advance the vision of this organization through my roles and objectives or not? Mm-hmm. And if not, what do I need to do in order to help it happen?
So we decided, or what we noticed was that this important tool that we have that Brian described had become more of a checkbox for the company. And we recognized that this was going to be one of the important keys that taught authentic leadership, and it also helped people to address conflict. So we decided, what better way to help people understand what a real SAM should be than to have the CEO do a SAM with the COO. We'll do
Technically, it was your SAM.
It was my SAM. We'll do my SAM in front of all the leaders of the company, so we can show them exactly how this should be done. We'll provide this wonderful example. And we committed to ourselves that we were not going to script this. It was going to be authentic. What occurred from it is it turned out to be way more authentic than I think we ever imagined. And I don't know.
Mission accomplished, but not quite the way we were
And I'll let
expecting.
Brian kind of describe what happened in that SAM and how it just became authentic. And it has become, since then, this was done, a year and a half ago, maybe? It has become...
No, it was early last summer.
Okay, it feels, It has become a, companies kind of have like the story that gets told over time.
Yeah, you need those sort of artifacts and those things to memorialize.
That's the word. It has become that for our company. I don't know that we would have done it if we'd known that it was going to happen that way, but it has become a key tool for us.
Well,
for experience.
I just want to add a couple things. I think this is important for anybody that's struggling with culture or change or alignment in their organizations. Is what's really hard is it's hard enough to capture people's hearts with something. You capture somebody's heart with a compelling vision, you get their heart, right? But oftentimes they go back into organizations and structures that don't reinforce what you just captured and captivated them with. And that's probably one of the biggest struggles is you have great leaders that have great visions, and hey, we're going to do this thing, we're going to see people as people, we're going to have compassion and integrity and blah, blah, blah. But then they go back into a structure that is not conducive for that.
Sure.
And what I like about Neighborly Ventures is that you've done the work of trying to create the structures that reinforce that. One of them is Sam's, right? But still, there's a missing piece of, I mean, those are two great things to have: compelling vision and then the structure that helps reinforce it. So you have both of those, and you still saw that it's still not easy, right? So that shares that goes to say to any leader listening how hard it is to do this work. It's not easy. You can capture people's hearts and you can get the structure in place, but still there's more to do. And I think a key piece is what you're saying is there has to be sort of a momentous moment. There has to be a catalyst, an artifact, something to memorialize for people to remember, right? For them to almost feel and taste and witness for themselves to carry it on. I think every organization needs that, and they need to try to create those moments for their organization, because that's what people hold on to remember. And so I think you had given them a compelling vision, the training, you had put a structure in place, but perhaps what they were lacking was something to memorialize it with, something to hold on to. And you gave them that unintentionally. With this.
Unintentionally.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
I really do. I think that's important.
You want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
One other piece of context that I think is helpful. The other thing that we, as a part of what for us is authentic leadership, is acknowledging that it's okay. I don't know is an okay answer, that I don't need to know everything as the leader. Now, I admit, when I first became CEO roughly 3 years ago, I had this initial feeling like I'm the CEO. I have to know how to do everything inside the company. I have to have every answer if somebody comes to me. And I'm grateful for what I had been learning and continue to learn about Liz Wiseman is somebody who specialized in this. She calls it multiplier leadership. And basically she would call it the power of not knowing, that the organizations that tend to achieve the greatest results are ones where it's not, I think she would say, not a genius with 1,000 helpers, but a multiplier who's leveraging the genius of everyone in the organization. And I realized, fortunately, fairly quickly that we needed the genius of everyone in the organization, truly. And that's not lip service. It was, if we are going to advance this vision, it won't be because we've got it, and if you just follow us, everything will go great. And that was another part of the gap. And so one of the things that we have adjusted because of this research is involving everyone. They were having a hard time connecting their day-to-day work to this lofty vision. So a really important part was, you know what? Because we're not the geniuses here that are going to figure this out, and if you just do everything we say, it's going to go great. We actually need you to help this vision happen, to solve the very problems that you're talking about and experiencing. They're not going to be fixed because we just issue 10 edicts. They're only going to be fixed when we are all participating in the vision, not just feeling like we're recipients of it.
Yeah, part of the story.
You're part of the story. You're part of the solution. So structurally, what we did is we said, here are our strategic initiatives last year, and we changed it this year, but last year we did, here are the strategic initiatives to advance that vision.
Yeah.
We would like every department to set 1 to 3 goals for each of those 5 initiatives. And that's how you connect your day-to-day work as a department, whether you're a community in Utah, or the accounting department, or the construction team over in Bend. You're going to participate and create some goals to see how you can help advance these strategies. That's why SAMs also became very important, because that's the structure in which then every month a manager is reviewing with his or her team how they're doing on advancing those goals. So I think that's an important note, that authentic leadership also means effectively leveraging the genius of everyone in the organization and not feeling the need to be the genius leading the organization.
Yeah.
So back to the Sam that became embarrassing, but potent.
But meaningful.
So remember, we're not going to script this.
Yeah.
We're going to treat this like a true Sam. And one of the most embarrassing but important things we realized is here we are asking everyone to do a Sam at least every other month. And we realize
they report it to HR that they've done it.
And as we get ready,
You realize you hadn't been.
we realize we haven't been doing it ourselves.
For months.
Literally, I want to say like 6 months.
At least, yeah.
6 to 8
Easily
months.
6 months.
Justin hasn't scheduled a Sam. Okay?
Brian wouldn't let me.
Brian was against it.
Authentic leadership is always good blaming. No, so we're both in our preparation, because in a real Sam, he will prepare a write-up and send it to me, and then I'm preparing as the manager, and then we come together, and independently we're coming to this realization that we're going to have to be very vulnerable in front of all of our managers, saying, Justin sitting there with me saying, Brian, one of the biggest mistakes I have made is I haven't scheduled this. And then conversely, me saying, you're right, Justin, that was a mistake. And I am at fault as your manager for not demanding that sooner. I mean, demanding is a strong word, but it's also my responsibility to make sure that that's requiring it. That's on me. So we're having this very real exchange in front of all of the managers. And I think they're kind of jaw-dropping that, A, you seriously haven't done that for 6 to 8 months.
And you've been asking us.
And B, maybe more importantly, you're willing to acknowledge that in front of us and acknowledge your own culpability in that. And then we talked about the costs of that, as we would in a real Sam. Like, what do you think the impacts are, Justin, of that not happening? And we rattled off a few very significant negative impacts, including his feeling, I recall you expressing you're feeling overwhelmed in your work.
And unsure and
a little
and
like insecure a little bit. And we realized you have been carrying that for this long because we made this singular mistake together. Now it's pretty difficult to adequately convey what happened in that moment in that room with, say, like
feel it
20 of our managers. I mean, that's a good chunk of our company, and all that middle management, remember, that we're trying to help build capability in. While in some respects it was a terrible mistake on our part that we hadn't had that Sam, it also was a poignant moment that said to everyone, we really mean that these Sams need to be this real. They need to acknowledge your mistakes, and it's okay. Don't walk into this Sam just checking boxes and saying everything's going fine. You saw right here that this is the moment when we gave an accounting to each other. And it wasn't like, here's everything I'm doing great. We zeroed in on, man, this is a real problem.
Yeah. And
if the CEO and the COO can do that in front of essentially all of the managers in the company, you know what? I'm as a manager going to start seeing my Sam with my manager or those who report to me a bit differently. And we got a fair amount of feedback that said, I'm really surprised that you did that. And I'm probably never going to look at my Sam the same way again.
Yeah.
One piece that I don't think we expected from it, but there was probably a benefit that came from it, was that the leaders in the room, while we were talking about the negative impacts to each other because we hadn't done these SAMs or hadn't done them well, most every leader in the room could also felt the negative impacts of us not holding a SAM and how it affected them because we weren't doing our job well. It affected them as well.
Yeah.
So they walked out of the meeting going, I've got to do these SAMs better, and I've got to do them, because if I don't do them the right way, other people down the line are affected by this. So that was a big authentic leadership moment for us.
Of exposing our inauthenticity.
Yes, our previous inauthenticity.
Yeah.
And trying to actually be authentic in a real way, where it wasn't we're just presenting the image that we want people to see about us and see about the company, but who we were, what our struggles are, and what we're asking people to do to help us and help each other resolve the challenges we face.
Yeah, it's a powerful moment and powerful story, and it's, going back to kind of, we need those organizations, people need those moments of an artifact or something to remember or something momentous. Honestly, they're just moments of moving beyond transaction,
Mm-hmm.
and creating transformational moments for people, and that's what that moment was, right?
Yeah.
It moved it beyond a transaction to a transformational opportunity. And what you've done is you've created an organization with a compelling vision, and you're doing your best to put in structures to create these sort of, as we say in Groundwork, these conditions for transformation. It's up to people to be transformational, but you're creating conditions and processes for transformation. But it's moments like that move beyond, and people remember it. We never forget transformational moments. We forget all the transactional moments every day, but we never forget a transformational one. And I think that's really important, and I think that's a key part of authentic leadership, and leadership is to create those sort of moments for people, and to celebrate might not be the right word, but to acknowledge them and point them out. So it's great that you did that, and I love that it was unintentional, which makes it even better.
Once is enough.
So when was your last Sam?
Last week.
Yeah.
All right.
That's right. Yeah.
Good.
I think one thing we should touch on too is, as we talk today, is the difference between being authentic and authentic leadership.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why it's authentic leadership,
Yes.
and it's something that we learned through this process with the research that was done. That, like we talked about earlier, it wasn't enough for us to just be authentic. We had to be authentic in our leadership, and that means something different than just, look, I am who I am, and what you see is what you get, and all about me. That's not what it is. Authentic leadership is something more intentional than that, and it's a leader having to adjust. And Brian helped us really explore that and figure out how to do that differently and what that definition is of authentic leadership.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, sometimes I feel in our current society, authenticity alone, that kind of, hey, you do you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, whoever you are, just embrace it entirely. So theoretically, you could be authentically a jerk, right? And yeah, you're being totally authentic, but you're being a terrible leader if you're a jerk, let's say, right? There's lots of things different adjectives we could use. Or
The sirens.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So, it's not enough just to be authentic, to be an authentic leader. And I get that as I say it, it feels like it's stating the obvious, but in a world where it feels like that there is that feeling of, hey, you do you, or I am who I am, and what you see is what you get, there's almost this like pride that sometimes I see in people just not embracing the idea of becoming better. Like, yeah, take everything that's great about you, keep that. And the things about you that may be negatively impacting other people, well, try to change those things. And that actually is a part of why our vision is what it is. At the end, it says, while advancing personal growth, because we genuinely believe that there's an innate human characteristic that we long to progress and grow. And we don't believe that there's a limitation. There's no ceiling on how much I or Justin or anyone in the company can grow. And so authentic leadership for us meant, well, great. I think genuinely we were genuine and authentic as individuals prior to and through and after the research, but we weren't being great leaders. We realized we aren't building leadership capability throughout the organization, and people are being negatively impacted by that.
And we're not adjusting to the needs that the company has from us.
Yeah.
Yeah, authentic leadership is not complacent leadership,
Right.
And I think as you were talking about how, you said the different perspective that people can have on authenticity is just be yourself and that's all that, matters. But what if being that authentic self is not good?
It's harming
If it's
harming
hurting
other people.
people.
Yeah, and I think a key word that came to mind was trust, of authentic leadership instills trust within other people. And not the trust that, well, I'm going to trust that Brian's going to be a jerk tomorrow. It's like, no, I actually I'm going to trust you because you're being authentic.
Yeah,
You're
it doesn't
an
mean
authentic
predictability.
leader. Yeah. It's not, yeah, exactly. It's not a prediction of, I can predict that he's going to keep being a jerk. It's, no, I actually want to trust this person. When I trust somebody, I give them a piece of who I am and I let them care for it.
Where they want to take me. And
Yeah.
help me, and who they want to help me become
Yes.
is something that I can trust is good for me.
I'm going to trust that person, that leader is going to help me become, like you said, what I can become. And we have to wrap up here soon, but something I've been thinking about over the last few minutes of us talking is there's lots of ways of saying things we've all heard before, like, hey, you become I think you said it once, Brian, you become the top 5 people you spend your time with or something. We've heard different iterations of that, right? That you become who you are around, and so surround yourself with great people, right? I think one of the challenges, though, of leadership is that one, you have to find those individuals, but if you can't, then leadership is you have to create the 5 people around you to become the sort of people that you want to be like, right? And so you have to perpetuate that idea, because leadership can be a lonely thing, and sometimes you feel alone. I was just talking about this the other day with a leader in Groundwork. It can be incredibly lonely, and so it's a job as a leader to create those 5 people that you're surrounded by, that you just want to emulate, right? That you want to be like. And that's a challenging thing. And I think that authentic leadership invites that. It invites the best in people. I'm going to trust Brian. I'm going to trust Justin with my development because he's an authentic leader and that's who I want to be around. So that's what I think is different than perhaps what we might see as popular, popular perspective of authenticity. So we've been going at this for a while. So I know we have places to be, so we'll wrap it up. But just kind of closing thoughts, closing statements on anything we've touched on. What do you think has stuck out to you as the most important thing that you're taking away today?
I'll let you go first,
I
Justin.
got to think about this. I think the closing thought for me is based. I'm looking back at the research that was done, that you did for us, and what we learned. And I wrote down a comment or a thought as I was preparing for this, that the challenge, we knew there was a problem in our company, and we're trying to figure that out. And the Groundwork research helped us identify what that was and solution. We needed a way to help employees trust our company vision and less us as leaders. We thought that by people trusting us as individuals, that would be enough to inspire people to follow our vision and to believe in the vision. But we realized it's important that you believe in the people you work with. But we realized it's just as important, maybe even more so in some cases, that they trust the company vision. And we had to become authentic leaders and bridge those gaps, help people bridge those gaps so that they could trust and believe in the vision. And that's what they work towards, not just simply because they believed that we weren't dishonest people or something. And as I look back on the research and the experiences we were having and what we learned and what we've been trying to do, and I look at where we're at now and where we want to go and where we need to go, we remain focused on helping people to become familiar with, comfortable with, and believe in and trust the vision more than anything else. And that becomes a standard they can hold on to. And then everything from there is about people being authentic to that vision and to each other because of that.
I like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I really don't want people focusing on us. I almost want to be invisible, so to speak, because there's something greater than us that we're trying to achieve. And I think, thinking if I were listening to this podcast, I know I might have this tendency to think, man, when am I going to arrive at being an authentic leader? And I think one important thing about authentic leadership is to acknowledge that it's really not a destination. It's a pursuit. And we're hopefully on the path of that pursuit, certainly have not arrived. And I don't anticipate we'll ever will arrive. But it is a priority. And so I don't think you have to be perfect at it.
Yeah.
We certainly aren't, or I hope we don't have to be perfect at it, because we're not. But we are pretty intent on pursuing it. And I'm thinking about, there are probably lots of ways to be an authentic leader, but one attribute or way of being that I think has the highest likelihood of achieving or progressing in the pursuit of authentic leadership is humility. I'm looking at Good to Great on your stack of books. I think it's in there where Jim Collins talks about the window versus the mirror. And I remember thinking multiple times as we were receiving in different batches the results of your research. And there were times when I wanted to look in the window and I wanted to say, well, why can't our people just get it?
Yeah.
And I was looking through the window. Like, this is on them to figure this out. Why won't they just figure it out? The more productive times, and I would say to the extent that we've had positive change in the year since, are the result of us looking in the mirror and seeing what had to change in us. And as a result of that, we saw, one glaring omission was we weren't building capability in our people. They had all of the right skill sets. Maybe we needed to build some skill sets, but they had all of the technical. They had what they needed to be what we wanted them to be.
Yeah.
And they probably wanted to be themselves. But we had not instituted systems and procedures and trainings, et cetera, enough to recognize, well, if we're going to ask them to get to this point, we have to help them. Not just expect that, well, I'm modeling it, so why aren't you doing it?
Yeah.
I just really want to emphasize that while I'm sure we had plenty of prideful moments over the course of that time, the most impactful moments were the ones where we were willing to look in the mirror and say, here's the ways we've got to change, and then act on them.
Yeah, that's powerful, and I think that's a great way to end the show today. Transformation, it doesn't happen without a mirror, right? It doesn't happen without a mirror, and I love the analogy you use from Good to Great of, are we looking through windows or are we looking at mirrors? So anyone, to the both of you, thank you for joining, and thank you for participating tomorrow and what you'll do with the group. Just an amazing sort of alumni family that's been created here, to where we have amazing individuals like yourself that are willing to help out and help the next year of leaders to continue to grow and develop. So thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in on the show, and I look forward to tomorrow. And anybody listening in, hope you've had many takeaways. There's been lots of takeaways that I've had, and lots of concepts and angles to learn from today's discussion. So thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for having us, Chris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
glad to be here. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Till next time, stay safe. See you later.